Alex Answer here. It is March 29th in the year 2019. In this video, we're going to touch upon a topic in which I've downloaded a few videos, one of which is a mini documentary entitled Seattle is Dying. It's a documentary about the homeless that was made by the mainstream media, and I am going to be discussing this documentary. This is not a new topic for this channel discussing the homeless, but this is something that needs a return to on a regular basis. So, as you know, I cover a number of different topics. Some things are like a dead horse. We can kind of kick something into the ground. Sometimes it's best to cover something and then come back to it. One of the things that I bring to the table as a media activist that cares about a variety of people, I bring my views to the table regarding homelessness and the people that are left behind and what is not being done to help them, despite the amount of people that say that they want to help the homeless, despite the amount of people that even collect taxpayer dollars and various levels of results come about through these attempts at creating affordable housing. It could also be argued that we're seeing a fair amount of poverty pimping, where the homeless are used in some cases to prop up massive government budgets. We're seeing elements of it now. We're seeing elements of it now. We're seeing like early level, we're going to show you some videos, but I want to give you a proper introduction. We're seeing what, like, this is the best you guys can come up with. You guys that are like, intellectuals, you guys are the ones that are running the city, you guys, the products of higher education and universities. This is what you have. The best you can come up with is tent cities. And the biggest argument is just where someone's going to go for the here and now in the moment. What about long term? What about long term freeing oneself from that type of reality and lifestyle? We're also going to talk about stereotyping. We can look at one documentary that was made in Seattle, Washington, and they say basically that 100% of their city's homeless are on drugs, and they also count marijuana as one of those harmful drugs. 100%. Now, I want you to think about that number. 100%, not 99% or 99.1%. No, 100%. And I want you to ask yourself, are they on the path to solutions to homelessness and preventing tax dollar waste when they can't even properly identify some of the real causes of homelessness? Because, for example, I could show you a number of media clips that are going to address the homelessness issue, specifically Seattle, Washington. And one of them will show you somewhat of an interview with, we'll start that in just a moment. We'll start our presentation in just a moment. I want to thank you for your support. I'm excited to break the computer out of the box, but as I said, I'm savoring the moment. For the very first time in years, I feel just a little bit ahead and not just totally like with my back up against the wall. And so I'm recentering on some of the most important core topics on this channel. And there are certain patterns of videos that I will watch for maybe hours. Some call it binge watching. But lately I download those series of videos, in particular in this case, because I'm going to show them with you or to you. And those of you that are in Portland, from what I gather, being on the streets in Seattle, for example, is far more harsh of an experience than, say, for example, being in Portland or some other places. And a lot of people don't know that, and how people are stereotyped as dangerous criminals that should be in jail, that should be permanently taken off the street. A lot of people don't know that this type of prejudice can actually cause a mental health breakdown in the person that's suffering from homelessness. And I'm speaking not off a script, but free flow. Like, this is just what comes to me as I watch these videos. Like, oh my God, they put all this production into interviewing these homeless, and they're not able to connect the dots, how not having a place to wash yourself and not having any hope for the future is going to lead to someone having mental health problems. And how is it a solution to homelessness to give promises of tiny homes if people in their backyards are going to let the homeless live with them? Now, how practical is that? How realistic is it for any of you, for example? to open up your home and your property to someone that you do not know at all. And I'm less likely to even be entangled with anyone at any time, period, because of the nature of what I do on YouTube. And I've seen the dark side of humanity as well as the positive, but I know that a person like me needs to be careful. Some of you need to be careful as well. You know, there's people out there that will take advantage. And so, like, if that's like the best they can come up with, here, we'll give you some sort of like tax credit if you let the homeless live in, you know, the backyard. At what point, and I'll wrap up my introduction here and we'll start the first video. We'll come back and forth, back and forth. At what point are they going to figure out that, okay, you have these causes for homelessness that expand beyond drug addiction, and being homeless can influence some people to get involved in drugs if they have no hope. Sometimes the drug stuff, the heavy drug stuff and alcoholism comes later, and the mental illness comes, and the psychosis and the breakdowns and what I would even call possessions. It comes later. And you're also going to see from this documentary, Seattle is Dying, very pessimistic. It also reeks of propaganda with problem, reaction, solution. Straight up put them in the camps. Problem, reaction, solution. Even a mainstream documentary is using the word possession as they hypothesize what is wrong with the man that's screaming to himself across the street that they filmed for a few minutes. And it's like, this is also in line with the theme that things that I've covered and perspectives that I've shared, people that are programmed by this world are programmed to call me crazy and to call the regular media the sane media. But the mainstream media also dabbles in conspiracy when it's convenient for them to do so. And whether it is taking it seriously or not, will dabble in questions regarding the paranormal and haunted houses and ghosts. So it's normal when it's the mainstream media and when Coast to Coast AM does it, which is very mainstream actually. But Alex Answer is crazy when he, as an independent person, comes up with his own ideas instead of just simply copying somebody else. So just food for thought that we live in a world that likes to persecute the little guy and create circumstances that challenges someone in unnecessary ways, while elements of the world's institutions want to monopolize thought, monopolize spirit, monopolize being considered a credible news source. They want to monopolize on all of it. But the greater reality is, as this world centralizes control, and I started out warning of this new world order, also known as the one world government agenda, this is how it manifests. This is how people are brought to their knees. We will start with this first video here, where this person is interviewing some homeless that are being
directly under I-5. We've seen how people get into homelessness. Today I want to find out how they get out.
There's going to be construction on the street. There's going to be heavy equipment. They're going to be digging up here on 6th. So ultimately, these people would have to go. It happens about 4 times a week. It really depends on the size of the encampment. If there is significant public health and safety concerns, these items right here are going to be stored. We'll leave notice, a phone number for how to go back and retrieve your items. Personal objects like clothing, medications, documents, we will store those items.
How often do people actually retrieve their stuff?
I do know it does happen. It doesn't happen all the time. The navigation team will be going out there, doing outreach, making contacts, try to build a relationship to have people eventually move inside.
What are you doing?
What am I doing?
Yeah.
Tying this down. They're doing a cleanup and we were asked to move. So that's pretty much what's going on right now. We got to relocate.
How many times has this happened to you?
Me and my wife, it's a couple times. We've been homeless probably about a year now.
How does it make you feel?
It is what it is. I mean, you can't.
It sounds like they're trying to get you into some housing and services.
And I do believe that we have found some, but I don't want to count my chickens before they're hatched. You know, that's why I didn't say anything. But my wife's on that. So.
You don't want to be homeless anymore.
No, Laura, I'm 50 years old now. I'm through with. I'm too old. Yeah, I'm too old for it.
Thank you.
Tough. It's tough.
They're offering me shelter, but I'm not going to take it.
Why not?
Because most of us have been through the mental health system and we know all about it. It's take a lot of your human rights away, and that's scary, so we don't trust a lot.
How many times has this happened to you?
Several. As long as I can stay dry and warm, the rest is just stuff.
Okay, so we will pause it there, and I will share some thoughts with you, and then we will go to the next clip. So you're getting a glimpse in these more fair and balanced pieces by other elements of the mainstream media. So you can see how there's deception there in the Seattle media, and I want to show that to you. Like, here we have this level of suffering. These people have real stories, but other elements of the media are going to marginalize it a certain way, so they're all locked up and considered criminals and drug addicts that are a threat to society and a threat to tourism. And the other thing that I'm noticing, of course, is this nationwide homelessness problem. And it's constantly like they want to view it as a mental health breakdown instead of really look at the economics. It's not just 2008, 2009. It's not just affordable housing. It's also, as I mentioned, the land use codes that prevent some people from exiting this city life. Some of you have talked about the Agenda 21 blueprint to lock people into the cities. And it's not really coming about in the direct way in which mainstream conspiracy theorists have warned. It's coming about in some indirect ways, but it is including planning and zoning. And these are things that people can change. These are things that people can change on a local level. There are people that have suffered from the planning and zoning departments, from county to county, nationwide, and some people may have allegiances to sitting presidents and other politicians. Well, think if there's a Bernie Sanders somewhere out there or a Donald Trump that cares about them and their off-grid rights. And I've seen no evidence of this. All I've seen is evidence of a bipartisan conspiracy to get us in these wars that we're not destined to win and to bankrupt our society and to, by design, turn a lot of people into criminals. Through the homelessness epidemic, where a lot of these people may have been working 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and able to afford a normal way of life, their story isn't being told in the totality. This is the best. This is like a society in collapse when the mainstream media can't even get it right and properly share someone's story. I'm going to go ahead and get the next clip ready. This is going to be a series of videos I'm showing with you that I think are a little bit more fair and balanced, showing the human side of it. Then we'll show you the nitty gritty. Then we'll show you elements of Seattle is dying, and you can see how the situation is being used as propaganda to demonize these people. But the question is, what if it was you? And a lot of these people can't even imagine what it's like to be homeless because they still don't even know what it's like to be in that situation. You know, it is like musical chairs. The homelessness reality that we are seeing today is like musical chairs, where the people keep rotating, only in this situation, they're unconscious of it. Just like people are unconscious about influences upon their consciousness and brainwave states, people are very unconscious regarding mind control. And they're very unconscious of the fact that we have been socially engineered to hate ourselves. Politics is one way that they do it. Pitting the homeless or the people with homes against the homeless is another way that we slowly sidestep into fascism. Let's take a look at this next clip.
Panda.
Yes, sir.
We are here in Seattle. You're homeless. Tell me about it.
Homeless. I came here because I have other homeless friends that live here, and I heard about these tiny villages that they're putting in, and I said, you know, I have always wanted to participate in community and be involved in creating something good for my brothers and sisters that suffer from the same thing I suffer from, and that's chronic homelessness, whether it be from self-induced or self-imposed or community-imposed or social imposed. We all suffer from the same thing, and that's homelessness. And having a place to call home is very important. And that's what this is a start on here.
So tell me about this place.
This is TC5, which used to be Tent City 5 in the city of Seattle. It's a city-sanctioned camp, but now we've called our name Tiny Cabins 5. And we're still the same TC5, but now we're a Tiny Cabins community. And that's what we're working on, is building community amongst ourselves.
So, from my understanding, you guys have this land with the city for 2 years.
Correct. We have this land for a 1-year lease with the Port of Seattle, which is a part entity of the city of Seattle, and with an option for a second year after the first. So this is a temporary location that we're building community in and working with our community that we live in, the greater area around us. Like this is all elected officials inside the camp.
And he looks like a decent guy. He doesn't look like he's on crack. I think what people need to understand, not only are they being demonized, but there isn't really much hope or a future that I can see that's being presented for the homeless, other than maybe being able to get a few nights sleep at maybe one of these tent ghettos, which I would never want to be in myself. And these are like the alternative to, like, the other shelters that are indoors, where you're going to get searched. And if you have something to protect yourself, well, you're going to be disarmed. And, those are really dirty places. I always avoided places like that. When I was 19 or 20, though, I had a little extracurricular research that I chose to do during my earlier dark ages of learning, right? Where I chose to grow up real fast in Old Town Chinatown, where I made my own mistakes. In the late 90s, early 2000s, I got a feel for that type of environment. So on one level, it is true that there are some deep psychological problems with people that are going to stoop to being around those environments, soup kitchens, things of that nature. And, the short of my story is, when I was fucking up, I did change my life fairly quickly at a young age and got into alternative media because I saw like the alternative. But I also made mistakes deliberately in order to do my own like research. So I feel like I have like insider knowledge because of my life experiences regarding the truth about Portland and those streets and the negative influence of those streets. And I can imagine Seattle. I've always perceived Seattle, that creepier big sister or big brother, big archon to Portland, Oregon. I stayed away from Seattle. And not to bash my mother, but I have been critical of those trips up to Seattle to some of those gatherings and things of the 1980s. As an adult, I suspect some things regarding those groups. I believe so does she and others. I think a lot of people were duped. The thing's still going on today with people claiming to be channeling the Galactic Federation of Light or Ashtar Command or things of that nature. But for years, I've been hypothesizing something reptilian or archonic. Well, there I lost a few people, but not all of you. Something about Seattle, something about that Emerald City. I've heard other people that have, been important that talk about something really evil, man, about Seattle. Like they were like, "Whoa, man, that place is nuts," and I was like, "Okay, I get where you're coming from." So there is something about Seattle that has that type of underbelly. So does Portland. Portland always came across though as maybe more feminine, having maybe more spirit. That also includes the demonic as well, like extreme highs and lows. And so there are some people that might find themselves, for whatever reason, stuck homeless in Seattle. I think everything's happening for a reason. And some people in Portland. It's not the same experience. I was definitely not drawn to even visit Seattle during my home free days while living in Portland, Oregon. I did visit Stevenson, Washington during that period in which I was sleeping in the canopy of a 1985 Toyota truck at the time. But I specifically stayed away from Seattle. So what I'm proposing to you now, taking my information I already knew about Seattle and looking at this, um, they're in a rougher situation than the homeless in Portland. And Seattle, according to the documentary Seattle is Dying, has one of the highest rates of property crimes of all the major US cities. It's up there with San Francisco. So like it's its own dimension. You need to consider though, like the nightmare of being a homeless woman or a homeless man and having society fear you. So I was strong enough to pick myself up and keep going. And I was still creating video and media content. And some people were still donating my work. And eventually I was leaving Portland, Oregon. Thanks to audience support and thanks to the passion and drive within myself. Other people don't have that. I want to come back and talk about, so what opportunities is being created for the homeless? Because I don't see any attempt to, I would say the best thing is for cities to create jobs specific for people that may have no specific job training, something that, you know, if they do go off and steal something, it's not going to be a major issue. Something that allows someone, though, to prove themselves and get off their feet, like an actual advanced form of something beyond Portland street roots. For those of you watching in Portland, you know what that is. For others, it's a newspaper that homeless people sell on the corner. And it's like not something that I would want to do because a lot of people are doing it, but it's all that people have. I think that there are other things that should be given to people to enable them a ability to make money, whatever they're perceived to be doing with the money, regardless, to create a way that they can create revenue. And an easy way that cities can do that with their millions of dollars that they're waste and often waste money protecting themselves in court with their city attorneys. But they can designate a building and a website where homeless people with skills can sell their wares on some sort of social media website. And I proposed that years ago as a solution that I do not see them partaking in. One of the things that we're going to do now is actually hear from Street Roots in a interview with KGW.
From KGW News, this is Straight Talk with Laurel Porter.
Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter. Portland's 911 system is clogged with calls about people experiencing homelessness or other behavioral health issues on the city streets.
And that is an important detail that we will note now. That like there's still at a primitive level of like homeowners, of even dealing with and facing the reality of the slow drip economic collapse, also known as the extended recession. We're living on borrowed time. And so resources that should go to protecting people are instead being used to incarcerate people while they spend trillions, not billions, on war. I just want all of these like little dimensions and dots to sink in, because this is a conversation to have alongside the military budget, the blank check that never seems to end. There's a correlation.
Many times there's no need for a response involving a badge or a gun, but Portland police often deal with these calls because there's nowhere else for people to turn.
And some homeless are veterans. Many veterans that have served overseas have PTSD. And then you have police responding to potentially suicidal people at a very poor time in their life, with many of today's police hires having very little to no, depends on the person, people skills. Kind of like a lot of the caseworkers and social services today.
But Eugene has been using a different model of response to calls that don't necessarily need police intervention. They've been doing it for decades, and Portland is taking notice. We'll talk to the new executive director of Street Roots to find out how it would work here. And later in the show, think Oregon is green, environmentally friendly? An Oregonian investigation will have you rethinking that. We'll hear from the reporter behind the series, Polluted by Money. First, let's meet the executive director of Street Roots, Kaya Sand. Welcome to Straight Talk. Your first time here. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you so much, Laurel.
You took over as executive director when Israel Bear stepped down late last year. What have these first months been like for you?
They've been extraordinary because I get to be part of an organization that's about bringing people together across housing status, which I think is something that we really need in our city. All kinds of people care whether they're housed or they're homeless. And so with Street Roots, we bring people people together on street corner by street corner, because we have people who are homeless or extremely poor, 170 of them, selling it every week, selling the newspaper. And it's also a hand up for people because they buy the paper for a quarter and they sell it for $1. They're acting as their own kind of micro entrepreneurs out there on the city streets.
And for people who haven't seen, I'm sure they have on the street corners, this is a copy of one of your editions that one of your special reports will be talking about. You not only do things involving the paper, which has a circulation of about 10,000, you also do advocacy for people who are homeless. And I want to show our viewers some numbers because this topic is so important to our viewers. A new DHM poll shows 33% of respondents say homelessness is the biggest concern facing the city. That's up significantly. In 2011, only 1% said it was the top issue. So only in 8 years that jumped. The Willamette Week reports the Portland Police Bureau receives a call about an unsheltered, unwanted person frightening or inconveniencing someone. Every 15 minutes they get a call like that. And the Oregonian reported people experiencing homelessness account for 52% of Portland Police Bureau arrests in 2017.
Okay, so we are going to continue. The rest of the clip is great. And I will implore you to check it out on your own. Now, do you get that last statistic there? Half of arrests were homeless, and then we get to Seattle later, and they're like, most of their arrests are homeless. Social engineering for people to become criminals. And then I've talked to you about people living, unregulated on their land. And a lot of counties don't want to mess with people, but the state and the federal government, they're the ones that come with the hammer. Costilla County was kind of acting on their own that we know of, perhaps other special interests behind the scenes. So there are other causes for homelessness that push people out of the country and into the cities. And this isn't purely ego when I say this. It's educational regarding modern journalists' ability to fully tell a story. Do they ever cover success stories? And am I or am I not a success story? And a person who created independent media, right, how that was not economically viable, but instead of screaming on the street corner, right, like that, the other character in the movie falling down, and Michael Douglas is watching for a minute, and a black man is walking up and down the street saying he's not economically viable. I guess he was laid off from some sort of a company, maybe a software company. He was upset. The police came and took him away. But what I'm doing and trying to explain calmly at this moment is that my story is a story of success. It doesn't mean that the challenges are behind me. Poverty isn't, but displaying a modern use of technology that journalists in the past, especially those in poverty, didn't have, and trying to use it for the highest good. And kind of how sad it is that they want to demonize so many people as alt-right, far-right, where there are people like me and other men and women that have their YouTube channels that aren't extremists. Like, this isn't just about me. This is about others. How many other success stories are out there relating to people on their YouTube channels? I don't think it's just me. Now, some people, they kind of embarked on the RV thing. They may have started out homeless and started a channel, and maybe they continue to be homeless. I mentioned one lady before with like 100,000 subscribers. She's not political, so that's actually going to be pretty popular when you just provide the good times, get down on it, and you're partying, or you're traveling and you're showing the sights, the positive energy, especially the camera picking up the glow of a sunset, and you're traveling around. There's a reason why there's like a micro cult following and a lot of supporters behind Nomadic Fanatic and other channels. I forget that. Maybe it's Caroline's RV. But I think the point is that what we are demonstrating is another way we are living our lives, in which, I think about people 10 years ago, 15 years ago, like there's the dark side of the internet, but there's also the way in which it's liberated us. And so at what point do they talk about the real solutions and the real causes of homelessness? And are we seeing that now? I don't think that we're seeing that now. The best that we can hope for, the best that we can get, the best that we can find. in these clips. Let me try to find you one more before we go to Seattle is Dying. Dun, dun, dun. Be afraid, the homeless apocalypse is upon us. They must be mentally ill zombies. Don't look for the root causes. Don't look for the root causes. But the best that we can come up with are people going, it's a mix of affordable housing, mental illness, the 2018 or 2008, 2009 banker bailout crisis, and other factors. Like, that's the best we can get for them to at least get some of like the talking points down correctly as to what causes homelessness. Now, as far as solutions, forget about it. Forget about it, right? Again, they can only suggest what they call affordable housing, which in many cases requires taxpayer allocation and government involvement. It's a form of government housing. In many cases, people abuse the Social Security system because of a need for housing or HUD. And I'm not here to put down those that are using HUD, that are viewers of mine, right? But there is a whole nation, though, that is part of a welfare state. Now, I'm just talking in a generality about how unsustainable it is economically. And what happens to all these people, by the way, that have been on HUD and have been on disability when we go through an economic collapse? What if it's to take place during a period in which, like, the full-on economic collapse is here, and perhaps other geopolitical realities to where the government isn't going to be able to keep issuing those handouts? And that's why I've been, suspecting and talking about in the other videos, it's not really a full government shutdown. They're just like fucking with us. This is politics. We're out of the government shutdown now at the moment of recording. We'll be back in another one, but a real full-on government shutdown would really be effing up people in poverty. They're on HUD, disability, SNAP, et cetera, et cetera. Are the people of this nation ready for something like that? How about massive numbers of people hitting the streets and becoming homeless? So as they build up this hate campaign of the homeless, as we're about to see, what does that then mean for people like you that may be challenged in the future? Listen, there are people suffering now, and this is really hard on their ego, that were making the bling bling years ago. People that are smart, people that are intelligent. There are people that are suffering economically now that are elderly, that are no longer in their physical prime, that have a disability. I have a friend back home that has a disability that has affected his ability to work. And that sucks, as most of you can imagine. Can you imagine being in a situation where you have the reality of property taxes in the modern Portland? Yeah, he bought his home at $17,000. It's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars now. Can you imagine the property taxes? Pray for people like that. Because before he was even in that situation, while he was still working, I was already seeing the writing on the wall. And people like him in his age group going through that type of a stress that a lot of people traditionally that have owned their own homes haven't seen. Like when property values go up, you have things that lead to people potentially becoming homeless when they're elderly after having a career for a lot of their lives. If they worked at a lot of different places, maybe they don't have a pension. And how many are going to have Social Security in the future? So, like, this nation is heading towards economic collapse and more homeless hitting the streets. What are they working to help them and talk about real causes and success stories? Or are they setting us up? I'll say us. Because as a nation, we're looking at a nation of American refugees. That's what I foresee. That's how they're setting them up for the camps. Through this demonization of the homeless. Finally, listen, I don't believe in every gang stalking theory, but it can happen and does happen in some degree, like actual government harassment. But I think what's happening with a lot of homeless is spiritual attack because they don't have a safe place to be free from some of the evil spirits in places like Portland. And it's not natural for people to be around all these technologies. And so I believe that these people are being spiritually attacked and possessed in a lot of cases. I don't think that it's funny to make jokes about bath salts and to laugh at these people having a breakdown. because they are having a real man or woman screaming from the wilderness. They're screaming for humanity. And humanity's not waking up. Humanity is not even realizing that, wait a minute, we can have a major health crisis on a situation if we just, and so now they're at this point of going, so what do we do? What do we do with them? And they haven't even come to the right reasons of why do they want to do something with them to begin with. They just want to get them away from them. And they're still trying to find solutions, how to get them away from them, without like really playing through all the things that need to be considered in that equation, even to be successful at that goal that they stated in of itself to get the homeless away from them. There has to be something selfless, though, a spark within them to foresee a way to actually help them, not just push them away from them. So they can spend money and buildings and all this stuff just to push them away from them and push the problem away from them, but not actually deal with the reality of the modern economic collapse and musical chairs and those of us that have been left behind, or will be left behind, while ignoring those of us that have success stories. So how do they really care about the homeless? How does society really even care about itself if it's still blind? Society is basically blind. All this is a reflection of the collective consciousness. That's the final point before we go on the next video. We'll go to Seattle is Dying. I want you to see this. Seattle is Dying. This is the intro, making the apocalypse out of the homelessness crisis while avoiding the main issues. And so there's all this sensational, gross pictures of garbage. Repeat. But there's so much more to the topic of homelessness. Causes and solutions.
Let me ask you something. What if Seattle is dying and we don't even know it? This story is about a seething, simmering anger that is now boiling over into outrage. It is about people who have felt compassion, yes, but who no longer feel safe, no longer feel like they are heard, no longer feel protected. It is about lost souls who wander our streets, untethered to home or family or reality, chasing a drug which in turn chases them. It is about the damage they inflict on themselves, to be sure, but also on the fabric of this place where we live. This story is about a beautiful jewel that has been violated and a crisis of faith amongst a generation of Seattleites falling out of love with their home.
It's not what happened to these people. It's how did it get so dirty? Understand they're not even at the level of even dealing with what's going on. They're in a level of problem, reaction, solution. The name of this is Seattle is Dying. I'm just going to show you like a few segments of this.
There is another part of this story too. It's about a solution, an idea for a city that has run out of them. And I ask again, what if Seattle is dying and we don't even know it?
Jeez. And it's just about you, Seattle. Right? With your hot silhouette of an alien space needle. Oh, it's all about you.
I drive my 12-year-old's carpool through Yesler when we do carpool, and it's a good talking point about, what they're seeing, what we can do to help, how we can make a difference. And honestly, at this point, I don't have a good answer for how we can make a difference. The last 5 to 10 years, it's not the place that I grew up in, and it's been really sad.
Matt Campbell lives and works in Seattle. He's raising a family, and like many others, he's mad.
And they're looking at this like, oh my God, we were just standing here one day, and all of a sudden these weeds started growing here. I don't understand the solution, nor do it's just so ugly looking. Let's take pictures of it and put sad music behind it. And that's where all these weeds come from. It's not, well, there was this thing that came before with like this bird that came, caw, caw, and spread the weed seeds through its fecal matter. Like there's a whole cause and effect process to how people become homeless, how economies collapse. how empires like Rome, like the US, collapse in on themselves, and how this is right in line. And no, let's not also talk about how the women, though, are going more into human trafficking or being trafficked or sex work as a result of the economic collapse and other factors in a corrupt society. And let's not look at these wars that are being launched one after the other with no solid fiscal type of solution as to how long term we're going to pay for this without, our kids and grandkids being sold. Um, these types of things should spur intellectual questions inside these minds of these well-to-do men that are going, oh, I've been so successful making all this money for so many years in Seattle. What the hell is happening to our city? If you're so dang smart to understand the economics of certain things, trading, running businesses, being able to afford what you own, how can that intellect then be applied to understanding what causes homelessness? Where do these people come from? Why is this seemingly everywhere? If it is a mental health crisis that's seemingly happening everywhere, then where is it coming from? And like you have a dumbed down society to where there are people out there prancing around like they have superior IQs, abilities to understand things. I think some people have a superior understanding of how to blow some things up, but how to actually think tank and as solutions to the breakdown of society, not so much. Not so much.
It's gotten to a point where I'm embarrassed of it. I don't want to have my friends and family come here anymore.
People didn't used to use the word...
Can you imagine? Can you imagine the breakdown in a personal life? I'm so embarrassed that my neighborhood is no longer plush. The realities of the economic collapse are in my backyard. It's no longer a fun wine and cheese night for Billy, who's been living in Seattle his whole life. Oh, God.
Embarrassing about Seattle.
And it's like,
but if you listen...
At some point, I don't care. Okay, so we're all divided by counties, blah, blah, blah. Here's the deal. If these people wanted to, they could come up with a type of collective movement that could do something for the homeless. There's a lot of unused land in our nation. There's a lot of excuses for kicking people off their land. You know where I'm going with this, sunshine. If the will of the people, dun 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 dun, was aligned, and just cut through the bullshit, get something done, provide them a way to improve their lives, give them options. Don't act like you're completely clueless as the cause of homelessness. But we have these people that are in these positions. I'll make another important point. They get into these positions of wanting to organize millions of dollars to build these solutions to homelessness. It's called the Tiny Home Project, and people are going to be charged $700. I'm sorry, what? $700? This is an affordable housing solution to homeless. Okay, Mary Poppins, Miss Homelessness Solutions. How are they going to get that money? Now, people got to wake up. There are people on the streets receiving Social Security disability that can't afford to live somewhere. So those people will have a shot at giving their whole paycheck over to whatever corporation or entity is going to be running that tiny home village. So their tiny home solutions, I like to see like there was one that was citing like was it Chloe Udaly, who's being put on the seat by Eli Ritchie, and the city of Portland, by the way, is moving against Eli Ritchie because of his attempts to question them in the street using their gender privilege, even though they're public officials, to say they're afraid of people asking legitimate questions. And I was actually Googling some things that Eli had claimed about Chloe, her bookstore, Reading Frenzy, which is no longer open. She had to close it when she was elected. The point of this, and we're talking about Social Security disability, there was a YouTube video that was titled Tiny Homes for $985. like ultra clickbait. Like Portland had come up with this $1,000 tiny home solutions. And I see like this clickbait nature to tiny home news and public officials and people trying to ride that wave. Like I even met like a dumbass couple from Taos, New Mexico that was here in town. That was like, oh, you're from Portland? I heard that they're like putting the homeless in like tiny homes and stuff. Like, but to like to know like the real Portlandia that that's not really happening for a lot of homeless that are suffering, that that was propaganda, and to know that they use that to boost their own popularity is sick. It's disgusting. Charlie Hales did it, the former mayor of Portland. We're going to tiny home for if what? People that already like paid $1,000 for to have somebody move in that they don't know that might be a freak. And I'm telling you, there are people that are freaks in some cases that are homeless. Not all. And while I was living in my vehicle, so not fully homeless for that 1 year, there were only so many people, very few in fact, that I can go visit or park my car near to have that sense of psychological stability. I was literally in the streets, but I survived it and got out in time. And a lot of today's homeless advocates, like Mimi and others, Star, they have chastised the Portland City Council for allowing people to freeze in the streets. At what point is it assumed that government's responsibility, it's only the government's responsibility to be a helping hand or a homelessness shelter? At some point, we need to realize that some people just project their own selfishness onto public officials. That doesn't mean that I'm vouching for Wheeler. It means that there's a lot that the community can do, that churches can do, that private law owners can do to give a helping hand. And there's ways in which people like myself and the videos that we create, people can look at those things and go, okay, that's not a typical junkie. That's a guy who's like a starving artist. There's a big difference between that guy and that junkie over there that's going to rob me. But here we are in 2019. And I've even seen people try to use people's cannabis use while they're homeless against them. I mean, be real with me, sunshine. Who wouldn't smoke weed while they were homeless to alleviate some of that? Most people smoke weed anyways. But I saw signs in that documentary that they were trying to somehow associate cannabis legalization with homelessness, which is taking some things, scapegoating, straw manning, things of that nature, to whole new heights or whole new lows. Let's go back to this.
You'll hear it a lot now.
You know, it's embarrassing. This is one of the most beautiful regions in the entire world, and right now, with lack of
it's so pretty. And this guy's yelling, and they're yelling, and they're talking about taxes for this. Let's have taxes for that. And then this guy's okay. Here we go.
6,000 mark. It's not your imagination. The crime here, the burglaries, the theft, the stealing of cars is worse than in other big cities, and in most cases, it's way worse. And then you walk down the street and you see a wretched soul like this, consumed by demons, maybe madness, maybe drugs, maybe both. This is what suffering looks like.
So I've been talking about elements of the homeless being consumed by demons, and some people can consider that crazy, and other elements of my commentary. Como News here, ABC Channel 4, right? At this point, it's kind of obvious some of these people got demons. So some of the things I started out talking about years ago that seemed crazy, right now, elements of the mainstream and mainstream society, they get it.
This is pain. Ranting and raving, screaming silently, coming completely unraveled before our eyes. And then tomorrow, he'll wake up and relive the nightmare.
The other thing that society doesn't seem to get is that the obsession to drink and use to death or to insanity is also indicative of possession. Even drug addiction itself, when it has such control over someone that they're in that type of a situation, is indicative that there's some sort of a spiritual parasite that is possessing them to drink and drug themselves to death.
All over again. Starving, eating trash from a garbage can. Look at the people walk by. Of course they're not shocked. How could they be? They see it every day.
As the narrator
How can this be who we are? How can this be what we allow? How did the word compassion get twisted into this sickening reality?
You see where he's leading this?
Dad Blanket, shut up! We're driving full! Mom, Dad Blanket, shut up!
The Puget Sound
recently the number of naked men in Portland and have been discussing a pattern of that specific type of behavior, not just there, but primarily places like there, ironically, where there'll be a number of stories of naked men, whether they're homeless or men driving cars, a certain small percentage breaking down and breaking out in their birthday suit.
Business Journal estimates that Seattle and its outlying areas spend $1 billion addressing and responding to the homeless situation.
And how much of that money are the poverty pimps pocketing through dummy accounts and other means?
Every year. And they say that number is almost certainly underestimated.
Unless they can make money off of the homelessness solutions, we don't see a lot of city response.
Nonprofits, city and county budgets, police calls to homeless camps, hospital services, building tiny houses, drug treatment and outreach. Picking up needles, clearing out camps, garbage details, chain link fencing. And the more money we throw at the problem, the worse it gets. But of course, what is happening in King County and on the streets of Seattle isn't about dollars. It's about human lives. How can this be the right thing to do? How can watching human beings live and die in filth and degradation and madness?
So there's stages to becoming mad when someone's homeless and they don't have, for example, like the type of opportunities that I've had, intellectually, physically, audience support, and otherwise. And so it just gets worse for them. It gets worse, it gets worse, and it gets worse. Still, Seattle is a very expensive place to live. We'll go over visuals here. So while Seattle is a very expensive place to live, they have more homeless. We see a parallel with San Diego, California. We also saw news of hepatitis, a breakout in California. So sky-high rents, people fleeing, disappearing from California, more homeless, grossing out people. It's become like its own genre of YouTube videos, trending as it goes. Look at the collapse of California, and it's very, very sad that people are not connecting the dots. Here we see an RV with a lot of trash outside. There's a lot of, this is a mini story about an officer that quit his job because of the things that he was expected to do.
I feel like I abandoned the ship, that I walked away, and I did, because I couldn't do it anymore. It was just, the bureaucracy built up to the point where I felt like I was no longer necessary as a police officer, that the system had a different idea of how they wanted to handle it.
And we will go forward, try to show you as much as possible.
Holim. It means helping those who are sick.
You're mad, aren't you? I'm furious. I'm beyond furious. This has pushed me to a whole new limit. Let's get the sandbags off this one and we're going to pull the whole thing forward.
Ari has a company that sets up bouncy houses at concerts and festivals. He says it's not just the Jewish cemetery that's being desecrated, it's everywhere.
And I used to say, this place is great because the streets are so clean, it's so beautiful. You walk down the streets now, they smell like urine. The cemeteries are being desecrated. People can't go to parks.
So also the image of the nation is being desecrated. Does he see that? And so like you're going to see elements of the breakdown of society, and this allows a scapegoating. And it's important that people heal from that. Even if you don't like what you're seeing with the homeless, they are not the causes of the economic collapse. They are a result. Here's a story about a homeless person that sexually assaulted a woman.
And has gotten off the streets.
Feeds into the narrative.
Police say that on July 20th of 2017, this man, Louis Arby III, 41 years old, removed the screen from a woman's window at an assisted living facility in SeaTac and crawled in. The woman inside was brutalized for an hour. She was raped and beaten and choked and robbed.
Okay. And so that is a sad fact of life. There are also people that do those things that have homes, you know?
Small acts of incivility, things that cumulatively affect all of us, no longer have any consequences in Seattle.
Right. This is actually a piece that is portraying, for whatever reason, and if that is the case, oh my God. But they're portraying a city that is allowing people to roam the streets, committing misdemeanor crimes and not being held accountable. And sometimes some statements are a little bit extreme, but there is a argument that is being made that this is taking place, that this is causing a unnecessarily high amount of criminal homeless in that particular time space reality. Now, to think of them actually socially engineering that on the local level, as conspiratorial as I am, is a little hard to believe. I don't believe that those are intentional, and I don't necessarily trust the public officials. But this is the result of the situation that we're in. And so there are a high level of people that they are attempting to process through the criminal justice system, and it's only designed to hold so many. It's the basic mathematics of it. But I've always had a negative vibe or perception of the Seattle area for other reasons and have avoided the street culture. This is another story in which she's explaining that there's just not prosecution taking place.
911 at least 599 times over a 19-month stretch.
They're bold when they get caught. They kind of just, they don't really care, and they oftentimes we'll put in a police report and they'll get a trespassing notification, but then they'll just walk right back in, and it's kind of like, oh, well, you have this trespassing. Okay, what are you gonna do? Call the police?
And continuing on, let's go ahead here. And so, this is like problem, reaction, solution.
Make some kind of amends before something happens to one of us,
Now think Scanner
Look at this
Darkly.
place. Look at all the buildings, the infrastructure. What if this was a specialized facility where we could use all of our resources and knowledge to fight this thing that is happening? What if it was a place where doctors and counselors and caseworkers were available, along with the treatment drugs that we know work, the ones we know save lives? What if this was a very specific place where sick people learn how to live life again? Job training, therapy, treatment, all of it in one place. It would have to be a place where the patients couldn't simply get up and leave if they wanted, because the sickness is such that doesn't really work. But eventually they would leave and have jobs and families and maybe continue to use methadone, Suboxone, or Vivitrol for the rest of their lives.
Oh, they're big into promoting those things in this documentary. They keep coming back to the pharmaceutical solutions to drug
the way some people use insulin. What you're looking at is McNeil Island, completely abandoned for the most part.
Wow, does this come with a Lego set? I think I've seen this on.
You might call it an answer, waiting for the right question.
I love the guard tower.
It wouldn't have to be here. It could
the barbed wire, right? Got to keep the inmates inside.
But maybe that $1 billion
Panopticon dystopia
that we spent last year could be spent on a tough, compassionate concept.
Yeah, we already spent $1 billion last year. Now let's do this.
That actually works.
Yeah.
That saves lives.
Or however many hundred of people are being detained at any single moment in that facility. Okay, guys.
As Seattle and the rest of the West Coast wander in the darkness,